been great to be invited by ResoLex to participate in this interview. One of the things that we specialise in is what happens in groups. And the thing that is most important, which will be shared throughout this interview, is actually the importance of the project environment and how the project environment directly impacts, it either helps or hinders what goes on in groups. And if we care about collaboration, by definition we care about what's going on in groups. So we'll need to also care about the project environment.
So hi Rod, if we want greater collaboration, what do we need to pay attention to?
That's a great question. I think one of the challenges we have is that people tend to focus on either organisational level culture activities or working with individuals, so trying to do team development, giving people necessary skills. That's a great place to start, but I think it misses a key point. The key point is actually how do people truly work together. There's a term called the group dynamic, which is how people relate to each other, but the group exists within a context, and that context is a project environment. And depending on how that project environment is actually perceived by people, that will actually impact how they are relating to each other. And it seems quite strange that the environment that people are in is impacting how they're relating to their colleagues in a project. And so I would suggest it's one of a natural blind spot that we seem to have at the moment. And those that are working out how to create higher performing teams in various collaborative endeavours, consortium activities with infrastructure type projects, when they realise the environment that is created that people are working within has a direct impact on how people relate to each other, they can actually enable an environment that will help collaboration, as distinct from the norm, unfortunately, which is more hindering. So an environment that is hostile, doesn't allow psychological safety, that's where people feel they can speak up, say when there's something that they're concerned about, even express what could be perceived as an unusual idea. If people can't do that, what will happen is they will choose what they say. They won't necessarily always share what they see. And how often do we hear, both in large projects but also large organisations, where the senior team have actually become disconnected from what is actually happening on a daily basis. And then we get these big surprises. Projects suddenly become twice as long, they're in an expense line that we hadn't expected. And often when you talk to people and the groups who are on the front line, they're running the projects, they're living the day-to-day, many people actually have a sense there was something going wrong, but there wasn't a format or a forum because the environment was such that they couldn't speak up. Or if they did speak up, sometimes that was consequential to their future career prospects. In other sectors, we know whistleblowing has a problematic outcome for many people who are the whistleblowers. That is another example where the environment is not conducive for people to speaking up. So while we have initiatives such as Project 13, what's really interesting, if you explore Project 13, you'll find within it, it explicitly makes the link between the project environment and people being able to collaborate. That's not the only research. BIM, Business Information Modelling, is another example. It's a different sector, but that also identifies the imperative of understanding the environment people are in, because it impacts how people relate to each other. So yes, we can start at the individual level, provide basic skills, interpersonal skill development. There's both inter and intra. Intra is within the individual, which is the self-awareness component we often hear people talking about. Inter is between people. And there's a lovely example on an earlier ResoLex roundtable. There was a great talk about conflict resolution. What you find is the majority of people, if they are relaxed, then you ask them about how do they deal with conflict management. Many actually don't possess the skills to do it. They would rather avoid the conflict. Actually facing the conflict without fighting, but through dialogue, through meaningful dialogue, that's the way that you can actually add value to a project. Because it's the magic of the difference between, what can be first perceived as competing ideas. When they come together, they can create the sparks of innovation. And surely when we're embarking on major projects, I think we know we need innovation in there as well. And where is that going to come from? From the people that know the daily tasks, the people who are living the project. So as we think about projects, if we can create an environment which is truly psychologically safe, people can now share what they perceive, and it's often at the intersection of what at first look to be competing or conflicting ideas where innovation occurs. Look at any major innovation that's occurred, it's between multiple disciplines. So if we can create the environment that allows the skill that is available within the workforce that are working on your projects or within your organisation, if they can share their view and it be okay for it to be in opposition to someone else's, and then the dialogue occurs, and then that's where the magic will happen. And why wouldn't we want that to be the case? Accountability with psychological safety. If you're interested in the theoretical basis of some of these ideas, Professor Amy Edmondson of Harvard Business School is a very good place to look. You can Google her and you'll find references to her work. And she's done a lot of work on teams, both in healthcare but in corporate settings. And having accountability with psychological safety creates one of the most potent environments to enable the project to be as best as it can be. So it was great to be invited by ResoLex to support one of the roundtable initiatives, and this is where we were looking at the project environment and its impact on collaboration. What we did is we took all the participants through both a little bit of background, but then we took them through a gamification exercise. And we've got this little game here called Navigating Collaboration, and it does just that. It helps you go through and understand what's going on in the project. So what we did, we basically went through a card exercise, we experienced statements, and then captured what a project to mind, and captured what we thought was going on in that group through what we call the learning dynamic. That's how people relate to each other within the group. But we also, more importantly, as our themes about project environment, we explored 10 statements around what we call the environment dynamic. That's effectively the project environment we're talking about. Within those 10 statements, we've actually got two theory bases. We explore both mindsets, so what's the mindset across the organisation or across the project, but we also experience motivation. And we look at motivation through the lens of what is called self-determinism theory. Those of you may have come across a variation of that called Drive by Daniel Pink, and his work is based on Daniel Pink takes the work of self-determinism theory and makes it more accessible in his book called Drive, and there's a great video on it as well. So by looking at the environment through the lens of both motivation and also mindsets, you start to have a frame of reference and a framework which helps you navigate the complexities of the project environment. So it was great to become a member of the ResoLex panel. That was a couple of years now, but what I've noticed is we've got some really strong members within the panel, but what ResoLex offers is actually an ecosystem with a broad range of clients. And what it does, it sort of brings the right members and the right skill set to mix with the appropriate client base. But it's very exciting as a panelist because not only are you able to engage directly with projects, but you get to also observe some of the things that happen through the roundtable events that I've mentioned already. But that position of being part of a professional group is a very privileged position indeed. So I'm glad to be able to help ResoLex and its clients.